little while ago, I made a video talking about how Sony's currently in the midst of what seems to be a big push to become one of the big studios that currently dominate the animated industry. There's no better time for it if you ask me. Despite Walt Disney and Pixar leaning hard on nostalgia right now, eventually that well's going to run dry and they're just not getting any nibbles on their original content. It's time for Sony's big push, because if they can get people on board with their own original content, then it's off to the races. That being said, as part of that video, I did talk a lot about how much of Sony Animation's back catalogue's not very lucrative and wasn't all that successful. I kind of think I regret that statement in a way. After all, money's not the be-all and end-all to every film. I often say those sorts of things in my videos, and I'm starting to think it might be a little bit short-sighted. After all, they did have a lot of high-quality films in the past, even if they were consistently behind the likes of Disney, Pixar, Illumination, DreamWorks, and even the late Blue Sky Studios in terms of prominence and prestige. Especially in their early days, just after they founded the studio, they were releasing some really good content overall, even if those films aren't looked back on in the same way as the Pixar or DreamWorks libraries of the 2000s. One of my favourite films of that 2000s era of animation, where a lot of studios were being really different and creative whilst Disney fumbled and lost the plot, was Surf's Up. It was only the second film that Sony Pictures Animation had ever released after open season, and it felt so fresh and different to what anybody else was making at the time. It's been close to 2 decades since that film came out, and now apparently we're getting a potential continuation of the franchise in the form of a television show that's being animated by Atomic Cartoons. I've never really heard of Atomic, to tell you the truth, so at first glance I wouldn't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. The name doesn't click when I tried to think of any of their works, which was honestly the case for a lot of these more minor or independent studios. Then I took a look at their filmography, and there were 100% things that I've watched before there. They got a direct hit right into my nostalgia. Atomic Betty? Captain Flamingo? Hell yeah! Some good memories of coming back from school when I was young, turning on the TV, and then watching classic cartoons such as these 2 masterpieces. So for those that are blanking on what Surf's Up is, it is 100% a relic of its time. Coming out right during the midst of Penguin Mania, where a bunch of Penguin content was being released, such as Happy Feet, March of the Penguins, Madagascar, even the likes of Club Penguin. It very much cemented itself as a cult classic of the 2000s. It's a mockumentary that follows the character of Cody Maverick, who's a small-town rockhopper penguin who lives in Shiverpool, Antarctica. Unlike most of his town, who are simply content to live their lives as best they can, Cody wants to be a big-time pro surfer like his hero, the Emperor Penguin Big Z, who visited their town when Cody was small and who died in a big surfing competition 10 years beforehand when facing the up-and-coming champion, King Penguin, Tank Evans. Despite his dreams though, he finds that his family doesn't think he has what it takes. Well, his mother and his older brother at the very least, because the documentary reveals that his father was horribly killed and eaten whilst fishing to support the family. Cody is eventually scouted to join the Big Z Memorial Surfing Competition being held on Pengu Island. This competition has been dominated by Tank since its inception, and Cody comes to despise this guy because of his disrespect towards his idol even after he's died. After Cody's humbled by Tank in a one-on-one surfing contest where Cody simply can't handle the waves, he's taken by his love interest Lani to see Geek, an old hermit who makes surfboards. Eventually, he realizes that Geek's Big Z, and he becomes his mentor and he goes back and defeats Tank, but he doesn't win the competition. He realizes that the point of surfing is for the fun of it, and by taking the competitions too seriously, you're going to lose your passion. You lose that sense of inner peace. Thus, when Tank returns and tries to take out Chicken Joe because he's a bad sport, Cody intervenes to help his friend and he gets swept away with Tank. Big Z comes to their rescue and helps Cody, and all's well that ends well. Cody's found his purpose and passion for surfing, Big Z has his own passion renewed, Chicken Joe's the new champion dethroning Tank, and of course, Tank is defeated and disgraced. It was a really good movie for its day, although it didn't really get the critical or commercial success I think it deserves. It got okay reviews and all, but it never really broke through either. It should be held up as one of the most creative and funny animated movies of the 2000s, and yet I can't help but feel it often goes ignored or forgotten. I feel that if it came out in today's market, it would be looked on a lot more fondly. It's just so very creative and unique. On top of that, it only grossed $152 million off a budget of $100 million. It was a bit of an expensive budget for those days of animation, and it did not pay off, I'm sad to say. It's a shame really, because it ended up costing us a proper sequel in the cinemas. Then again, Open Season did far better than this in terms of making money, and that still got a direct-to-video sequel. Maybe they were always going to be playing the cards close to their chest here and being conservative with risks. That being said, I think if they made megabucks the first time around, they would have 100% gone the cinematic sequels route. Instead, about 10 years later, they released a direct-to-video sequel film with pretty much none of the original cast returning, and a plot that focused more on Penguin versions of WWE wrestlers. Quite obviously, it was universally panned for a number of reasons, and did nothing for the legacy of the franchise. Maybe one day I'll watch this film to see how bad it really is, but from what I can see online, it has terrible animation, a terrible story, terrible acting, and it's just a blatant WWE tie-in, as opposed to staying true to the heart and themes of the franchise as a whole. I think it's safe to say that this one can probably be considered non-canonical. It's widely believed to be one of the worst animated films of the 2010s, so I think I would be interested in sitting down to see if it veers into so bad it's good territory. However, that's the thing, isn't it? It's a massively risky watch. Because if it doesn't end up being so bad that it's good, then I will have sat myself down for a fairly torturous hour and 24 minutes, which isn't something I'm all that excited to do, to tell you the truth. After such an attempt at a sequel, I wasn't thinking they'd be ever trying to continue on with this franchise ever again. After all, kind of becomes tainted goods, doesn't it? A lot of direct-to-video sequels are of dubious quality, but they rarely go this badly. So I am shocked they're making this. However, like I said, I'm actually really excited to see it being made at all. It does feel like nostalgia is something that's really popular in this day and age, and so a lot of these classic 2000s films are being brought back in one way or another. So I wanted to take a look at the press release to see what's going on, and thus off I went to Deadline to read the scoop, and there are a few key takeaways. Thunderbird Entertainment Group's Atomic Cartoons are going to be developing the series, as I said earlier. I liked some of their stuff from decades ago, but nowadays they make a whole lot of content of wildly differing styles. Thus, I have no idea what to expect from them, to tell you the truth. I hope that they go for something resembling the original visual style of the film. I just don't think that something like a traditional 2D cartoon is going to work all that well for Surf's Up. After all, it's meant to be in a mockumentary style, and I don't know if it would be quite as well realised if it was more traditionally done. That actually does also make me start to wonder, are they going to do this as a mockumentary type thing? Or are they going to just play it as a normal narrative? Because I just don't think it would feel the same or feel like Surf's Up if it is in that format. It's one of the key creative elements of the film that set it apart from the pack in terms of what it felt like to watch. Remove that and it's just a story about surfing penguins, which is fine, but it loses a lot of the humour along the way. I think if you market it as being in the same world but with a twist, then you could move away from doing things as a mockumentary, but the reality is that it's titled as Surf's Up, the series. Much in the same way as Tangled the series felt the need to retain the element that was most important to the film to continue onwards, which was of course the magical hair, so too would this series need to retain the two major elements that make up this film, the surfing penguins and being a mockumentary. I wouldn't say it would be unwatchable if it wasn't done in this style, because there's every chance it would be good, but it wouldn't be Surf's Up anymore. Something else of note from the press release was that the series aims to target children between the ages of 6 and 9 and will be 11 minutes an episode. So fairly short and fairly young, but who knows? Maybe it'll still be a classic. After all, it's not like the original was this hugely mature piece of media. It was a goofy surfing movie that very much fit into the family-friendly / widespread mass appeal type of market. Plus, a lot of shows have had a specific age demographic as their intended audience, only to find widespread appeal from there. Who knows? After all, it's not like they're cutting their audience in half by being overly kiddie with a nostalgic franchise. If it was a bigger name, I'd say that could be the case. After all, it's clear that modern franchise animated films clearly position things to try to attract a wide net audience. They want the new young fans, but then they also want the older fans who watched them as a kid. Surf's Up though, it's not a huge name, and so they won't lose much trying to simply appeal to the purely young demographic. Now, more into the meat of this thing. I'd argue that there's a 0% chance that the majority of the original cast will ever come back for this. I think the only person that would be the voice of Chicken Joe. Only a couple of years back in 2022, this dude lent his voice to the all-time classic animated film, Pinocchio: A True Story, the English dub. It really doesn't seem like he's going to care if this is some low-tier piece of media. The dude's going to do the voice. I'm pretty sure he was also the only member of the original cast that ended up coming back for the sequel, so yeah, count him in. However, I'd say that there is no way that this little spin-off show would ever get Shia LaBeouf, Jeff Bridges, or Zooey Deschanel. I mean, realistically, they wouldn't have the budget, and it would just be far cheaper and just make so much more sense to hire a vague sound-alike. That's kind of part of the charm of these sorts of things anyway. This in turn brings us to the story pitch, which was not exactly what I was expecting, to tell you the truth. According to Deadline, the story is going to follow an overconfident teen penguin named Flip, who teams up with a bunch of zany young surfers in his attempt to become a surfing legend. Things go spectacularly wrong, and the wipeouts are spectacular, and so instead they build their own surfing community on Pengu Island. Characters from the film, such as Cody, Big Z, and Chicken Joe, will return. Okay, so when I read those words, alarm bells were ringing for me. The fact that the episodes would only be going for 11 minutes already meant that there'd be economizing of the time. But now we have a new lead character who's going to be involved with the bulk of the story for each of the episodes. Then there's going to be the other penguins or whatever animals they choose to include. Each of them is going to need time and focus. That's just how these things go. Thus, by introducing this whole new cast and needing to give the story time to breathe and flesh them out overall, you come to the point where the prior leads from the film are given less time to shine. They're less necessary to the story, and so at best they'll end up as one-episode cameo characters, which is less than ideal if you ask me. After all, they're the characters we already know. When you think of Surf's Up, that's who comes to mind, so I think it's weird they want to go in a completely different direction for the most part. To me, it seems they want to be able to somewhat rehash the story of the first movie. This new guy, Flip's dreaming of being a big-time surfer, and in order to make it to the big time, he's going to assemble the team that he mentioned. It's much like Cody here, who came to Pengu Island to try to become a surfing legend and champion just like his hero Big Z. When Cody arrives, he got the reality check that he'd never faced anything quite like these waves, and he struggles to be able to compete. Thus, he has to learn a new way, and it becomes all about his love of the game more than winning. What's going to happen to Flip and his merry men? Why, it says right there in the little blurb. Things go spectacularly wrong, and the wipeouts are spectacular. They probably realize early on there's no chance they're going to end up as big-time surfing legends at their current skill level. So they create their own little surfing community, and I'm guessing along the way they're going to end up falling in love with surfing beyond just competition and realize that fame isn't everything. It really does feel like they want to simply reheat the storyline of the old film with new characters and hope nobody's going to notice. I just feel that there were so many directions they could take the story that would make sense and tie back into the movie in a better way that still maintains the vibe of what they were going for. I don't know, maybe the story could have been that they were making a follow-up documentary where Cody's trying to establish his own surfing school after learning from Big Z, and it's not going well. He has a bunch of students and hijinks ensue. I don't know, maybe that sounds like garbage, but I just really have soured on this Surf's Up show concept. It just doesn't seem like it's for me, and that's a shame, but I suppose I'll have to accept it. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the Surf's Up show concept? Do you like the sound of it? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.